us off. I thought you'll enjoy your pizza. I'm Jana, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Brown Girl League, and Sonal is one of our co-founders. Brown Girl League is a community for ethnic minority women, that most of you are aware about. Oh, sorry, can you not hear me? Or thank you. So you can hear me. I do have a bit of a cold, so please do bear with me. My throat is a bit scratchy. But in terms of the Brown Girl League, really great for you guys to be here. My gosh. And I've got some incredible panelists as well. So you guys are really in for such a treat. So today we're collaborating with BCS on our Leading with Diversity, the impact of women in industry, which is here together with incredible speakers from different industries, from the NHS to finance to tech to education. So you've got a real treat. And in terms of BCS, which will use your space. In terms of BCS really ensure having a positive sort of experience in tech. And that means that they've been around from 1957 and they have over 70,000 members in 150 countries made up of business leaders, educators, practitioners, and policymakers. They lead tech industry through the difficult challenges for people who work in the industry and to make IT good for society. They provide opportunities for learning and development, to support people's careers, progression, and raise standards of competence in their profession. They access and recognise talent from every level, and a diverse range of qualifications, professional registrations, content and skills frameworks. They do this through membership, inspiration, progression, and influence. So if you've not heard of BCS yet, please do check them out, especially if you're in tech. And then I'll lead on to our video with the BCS CEO, Rashid.
Hello, my name is Rashid Palmer. I'm Group Chief Exec at the BCS. I'm delighted that this event's taking place, and I'm really sorry that I can't be there. I'm actually on vacation, which I couldn't move, so apologies for that. But I do wish you all the success of the event. The Brown Girls League is really, really important. It's providing that platform and space for you to share some of the learning, have a safe space to talk about some of those issues that you're facing, and really learn from each other. These initiatives are absolutely key to help create the inclusive community of professionals that we need to build those solutions that society really needs. So I wish you all the success. I hope I can be with you in the future, and look forward to seeing you in person. Thanks.
Okay, so in summary, Rashid spoke about the Brown Girl League and our initiative and how our collaboration is just the beginning. So I'll leave it over to our amazing panelists, which I'm so excited for you guys to enjoy the conversation. From the left to the right, we have Sonia, who is a NHS system CIO, the head of a DT-AT profession, UK and Global CIO 100, chair of BCS Fellowship Committee as well. So a bit of a mouthful, but she wears a lot of hats. And then we have Sonia, who also wears so many hats. So we had a conversation earlier, and I was amazed by how incredible she is. She's an experienced leader, career development officer at BCS, business mentor at the Princess Trust, and a teacher in education. So she's very busy, as you can see. So I'm so grateful that all of our incredible speakers made time for us today. Then we have Sonal in the middle, who is one of our co-founders. And we have Champa, who again is an incredible individual, who is an experienced executive in technology, payments, travel, and business to business and business to customer. She's a non-executive director at GPE and has a wealth of experience in a range of industries. And last but not least, Kiran. Kiran is the Chief of Staff at Capula, a charity board member, school governor, speaker, member of the Middle Temple Inns of Courts, mentor at the King's College London, and chief member. So if you've not already done so, connect with them on LinkedIn because you're in for such amazing traits. Now I'll stop talking and let you guys enjoy what will be an amazing discussion.
Thank you, Jana. Hello, everyone. Thank you for making the time to attend today's event. We have 4 incredible panelists today, and today's conversations will circle around different themes of diversity, both in the workplace, in your professional and personal lives. And as we like to at the Brown Girl League, we want to cultivate relationships with within the ethnic minority space, that people you can go to for both a professional perspective, but also build those personal relationships with as well. So I think the best thing to do would be starting off by hearing the stories of these four incredible ladies. They all sit in completely different industries. They have had very different career paths, career journeys, and they come from different sort of career backgrounds as well. So we'll kick off from the right. So Sonia, do you want to share your story with us today?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you. Well done to the Brown Girl League. Where have you been all my life? Honestly, I'm probably the oldest person in this room, and hopefully you can stay awake for my story. But first and foremost, there are those titles, but it's important just to reflect. I am a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, and I'm also a wife, which actually preoccupies quite a lot of my time, and alongside balancing being what is the System Chief Information Officer for the NHS. So please don't blame me, we're working on it, but I oversee the IT for all our hospitals, mental health, community trust, lead on our large digital scale programs and infrastructure for the NHS, and we are trying. We will get better, we've got a journey to go on. And I've also taken up the opportunity to be the fellowship chair at the BCS, and I'll share a little bit more about that. But if you want me to tell you a little bit of my experience, so what makes me, I sit here today, but actually it's probably worth you sharing with you that I am a Gujarati Indian, and my forefathers are from Kenya, and actually my ancestors have probably shaped some of who I am today as well. So my maternal grandfather, he was a successful businessman that moved from India into Kenya, and then my paternal grandfather ended up being very, very different, non-conventional artist and photographer who had a successful business in Kenya. And that kind of, my parents coming together, who I now have passed, and my dad recently passed away, but I think my mum gave me my strength and my father gave me my spirit. So I think they very much make up who I am today, which is I'm very bold, I take a lot of risks, I'm very creative, and I don't say no. I can't hear no, and I don't say no, which can be both a problem as well. But I've had a very, very squiggly career journey. So after I failed my A-levels miserably because my parents thought I'd be a doctor, I now actually provide tech to doctors, which I think was a good career alternative. But in saying so, I did start my kind of early career when I came out of education, doing software development in the Cambridge Science Park. So as exciting as it was in the science park, and we were decoding the human genome at the time, but for personal reasons, I decided to transfer into the NHS because I needed to be closer to London, to be closer to my family. And I've never looked back. So I consider myself an NHS lifer, and I've had a bit of a squiggly career because as I came into the NHS, I had all these fantastic skills, but they had no IT to apply it on. So I was developing little bits of software. They got excited. I started climbing the career path. And then I did various different jobs that are not naturally IT related, but then I had my calling to do more leadership roles in IT after 10 or 15 years in the NHS. And I honestly, I pinch myself and go, I don't know how I got to where I have today, but I do a lot more reflective practice now that I'm older. So when I reached middle age, people said, how did you get to where you are? And I was like, I'm not quite sure. And now I've spent most of my time in middle age. I've now built up all these stories that I didn't realize I had around actually, the microaggressions I've faced in some of my career, saying, oh, haven't you done well for yourself? And I'll just take that as passing comment and go, thank you. But then realized actually that could mean something quite different. Friction still exists. It's still difficult in the boardroom, but because I'm still taking those risks and still bold, I still take some difficult times as well in largely male-orientated rooms. I think my tenacity is the thing that keeps me going. I also have in midlife, because you look back and say, actually, what will be your legacy at that point? What keeps inspiring me is events like this, which actually I'm in a place of privilege, and if I can do anything to make future better for you will be wonderful. But the hard facts are, and I'm sure coming onto this, is things are still tough out there. And, you know, whilst I sit in I think a helpful position to make a lot of change, I think there's still a way to go.
Thank you.
Wow, how can I top that? Okay, I'm just as nervous as some of you are here today. It's been a long time since I've done public speaking, so I've got my notes with me as well, so you can see I'm just like you guys. The other thing that I wanted to say is that I am a teacher. I do teach, and I have been teaching for over 20 years, so I am used to people looking at me. And they're my harshest critics. So it's really nice to be here tonight. I'm here for two reasons. One of the reasons is because I'm part of the BCS Early Careers Executive. And basically that was formed to support all colleagues who were joining the IT industry. So whether you're a career changer, a graduate or an apprentice, we are here to support you. And we're committed to growing a diverse community. If you look around the room, this is our community and this is who we are catering towards. We also help with your career skills, expertise and connections needed to shape your careers, as well as looking at what's happening in terms of the future of the IT industry. Regards to myself, I actually went into teaching because I wanted to make a difference. When I was younger, I probably didn't have enough role models because I'm going back 20 years and beyond because I am quite old now. And I'm actually a middle leader in the education sector, and I've run several departments, and I've run really tough departments. So I've done computer science, business and economics, and most of those departments are male-dominated ones. I've also run whole school projects, so I set up our whole school intranet myself. Again, I was working with senior leadership, and as my colleagues said, when you are working in a board full of men, it does get difficult, and as a female, you have to be quite strong and determined and tenacious as well. I also work for the Prince's Trust as a business manager, so I support young entrepreneurs and help them set up their businesses as well. So I'm quite good, I would think, at economics, computer science and business studies as well. Now, I took the traditional pathway, and I'm going to talk about education because I am an educational leader, but I actually did the GCSE's A-levels degree. And looking back now, I think that you guys have a wealth of opportunities that we probably didn't have at that time. And if I was to go back in time, I probably wouldn't choose a degree on its own. So I've spoken to loads of people, and the degree apprenticeship and apprenticeships and other routes into whichever field that you want to go into, you've got many more different directions that you can, different pathways you can take, which are much better than what I came from. I only got to go to university because I came from a low-income background, and my tuition fees were paid for, and I was the first generation graduate. So I had the most difficult task of trying to navigate the education system on my own. My parents both spoke English. We are Pakistani origin, and I didn't have older siblings, so I had to navigate everything on my own. And I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do either. So we had people come in to give talks and stuff, but at that time, careers advice wasn't very good. So my careers advice was literally 10 minutes in a room and me saying, yeah, I want to do biology, chemistry and computing. Because that's what Asians do, right? We do sciences and we do tech and so forth. And I wasn't decided because I actually wasn't very good at science when I was a kid. I started off in year 7 and I used to get grade E's. And then eventually over time, my grades changed and I came out with AA star. And I tell my students this all the time, that it doesn't matter who your teacher is. If you're determined, you can achieve whatever you want, whichever circumstances you're in. And it's the same in the workplace as well. It doesn't matter which environment you're in. If you're determined and you're going to make an effort, you're going to get to where you need to. I also thought about journalism and law, but I'd already seen people, you know, from my family, extended family, go into the law route. And at that time, because it was probably, it's probably my own biases, it was knocked into me that it would be better off for me to have a stable career rather than become a journalist and go travelling and all the things that I wanted to do. And I was never forced by my parents. So I was never forced by my parents in making my career choices. But I think because I came from a low-income family background, I was always conscious of the fact that I needed to have a stable career. I now help others to make sure they're making the right choices. So when I'm talking to my students, especially those who come from computer science, business management, or economics, I make sure that they're better prepared for their journeys in STEM. I was promoted quite quickly in the first organisation I worked for, and I've worked across a range of schools and colleges, so I don't just teach at secondary level, I teach sixth form as well. And I've taught in public schools, I've taught in grammar schools, and I've taught in private schools. So I've done the whole thing in the whole of the education sector. And I'm lucky because I got promoted into leadership roles quite quickly. But I wouldn't just base that on luck, because I worked hard, and I was saying this earlier, I worked not just hard as, like, you know, for my career, I worked probably 4 times harder than my counterparts, because I knew how hard it was for me to stand out. And it's something that, you know, it was part of my upbringing, because my parents always said to me that you need to work hard to get to where you need to. But unfortunately, even though my career journey has been fantastic and I have been at a leadership level, with other women, there is a tendency to sometimes get stuck. And so when I got to middle leadership level, I did hit a glass ceiling. So my last middle leadership role, I realised that I wasn't progressing the way that I wanted to. And some people can still, will still say to me, you can still go into senior leadership and you can still be a head teacher. And I believe that I can as well. But my priorities have changed. And I think that for me, one of the problems that we did have, and we do have, not just in the education sector, is that there are structural issues in place that are preventing us to get to the positions that we need to. And the support that we're supposed to have isn't necessarily there either sometimes. I don't think I had imposter syndrome. I've heard people say they have, you know, they don't have enough confidence and it's imposter syndrome. I don't think that was my problem. Because I've been doing the job for a very long time. I know all the requirements needed for leadership. I've been doing it unofficially for many years. I've been shadowing for many years. I've had mentoring, I've had leadership coaching. I just think that there needs to be support for women to move into senior leadership roles. And that's why I come to events like this, because it's important for the Brown Girl League, okay, and other organisations who are working in this space to support others who are coming back, who are coming into the industry, whichever industry it is. Now, change often takes time, and it's going to take some time for us to get there. But I also joined the BCS, and I just wanted to say a huge thank you to the BCS, and especially my mentors, Jag and Tim and Cola, and all the people that I worked with, because they actually helped me to support early career entrance. They've opened doors for me in ways that I didn't think were possible. They've allowed me to present at workshops. They've allowed me to write for the IT Now magazine. So I actually write for magazines now, okay, regarding tech. I do my own podcasting, okay, which is on the BCS website. And I also edit books that are going out to be published. And I also attend careers events and fairs at schools, colleges, universities, and I get to work with Microsoft. So at the moment, I'm working with Microsoft Teals to help support their project and going into local secondary schools to help support computer science education. So I've had many of my skills developed as a result, and that has made me even more confident and determined, because every time there's been an opportunity thrown my way, I've just said yes to everything. And that's what's important. You have to say yes. And what I would suggest to you today is, just to finish off, because I'm conscious of the time, that you check out the resources on the BCS website, because there is a CV checker, there's a community platform for you to ask questions. We've got specialist and regional groups to network with. My network has automatically increased, and that's really important, because when I was 21, I didn't have a network when I left university. I only had my close 2 friends that I studied with at university. how was I going to progress, in my career if I didn't have a network? And I don't just network within my own industry. It's really important for you to network with people outside of your industry as well, so that you get to meet a huge amount of people. So as well as joining the Brown Girl League tonight, please do make sure you check out the BCS membership and CP development that's out there, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be sitting here today in front of you guys. Okay?
Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you.
So thanks a lot to the BCS and to the Brown Girl League for inviting us today. And again, it's such a privilege to be part of a all-women ethnic minority leadership panel. I mean, how often does that happen? In the 21st century, it's a sad fact that it doesn't happen. And many of us in senior leadership positions still find ourselves in, sitting around a table with men and not enough ethnic minorities. So it feels like an absolute privilege to be here. Now, my least favorite question, I must confess, is when people say, tell me about yourself. It's like, where do I begin? And how much is too much? So what I will say is that, and I think very common theme here, I never set out to have the career that I do have. But I'll be honest, I did have a sort of ambition for myself, and that was, I love reading, and the most favorite book that I own, and I still have it, was my first ever atlas. I remember, I was born in India, but I actually spent my entire childhood in Nigeria because my dad was working there. And I absolutely have memory of when I got this first atlas, I would sit by the windowsill and go through this atlas. And by the way, most of the countries and the names that are on that atlas have changed, right? Like that's how much the world has changed in my lifetime. But, I'd look at that atlas and I'd imagine going to these countries, which, I can't even imagine what they would be like, and those strange names on there and what it would be like to go there. So I had this ambition for myself that I wanted to travel, and I wanted to travel because I was curious. I wanted to learn. And that's been the thing that has really been the common thread throughout my career. It's never been, I'll be very honest, it's never been about promotions. It's never been about status for me. It's been more about, what can I learn? How is this going to challenge me? How is this going to make me a different person and challenge all my preconceived notions? That's kind of how I've set about building a career. And I wouldn't say that, that's why I would say I'm a success. I'm a success because it has satisfied my curiosity and kept me curious. That for me is the most important thing. So I was born in India, grew up in Nigeria. I then came back to India to do, and again, Asian families, the choice was you're going to be a doctor or an engineer. I suck at biology. So it was like, okay, you're going to be an engineer then. And I wanted to do history and geography. So get this, the compromise we struck was undergraduate degree in computer science. It doesn't sound like a big compromise now that I think about it, but that was the compromise. So I did an undergraduate degree in computer science. And then, I got a job with a global bank, some campus interviews and stuff. And then literally a week before I was going to go join, I had this feeling that I couldn't breathe, that I was like on some kind of assembly line and doing what everybody else was doing. And it just didn't feel right to me. So in a moment's whim, I just wrote in and refused the job with nothing to hand, You can imagine how pleased my parents were. My dad did not talk to me for an entire month. But it just didn't feel right. I just didn't feel like I could do it. So in the end, I got a job at a mining company. It was a startup. The job was to set up their IT department. I was paid peanuts, practically nothing. The petrol that I used for my scooter to go to work was probably what my salary was, right? So literally, this was not going to be my long-term thing. But boy, was that the best decision I made. Because even today, despite all the amazing career opportunities I have, that job opened my eyes, just completely helped me reimagine what I could do in life. Now, anyone who's worked in a startup, the beauty of it is you get to do a lot of things. You know, if you're willing to step up and get involved. So even though I was there to set up the IT department, I ran logistics, I was cold calling Taiwan, I was shipping dynamite across the country, I mean, all kinds of stuff, right? Like I was in and out of mines. I mean, there's none of the stuff that they put in a job description. They probably should have paid me more. Frankly, even if they had paid me nothing, I would have done it for free because I was learning so much, right? And it was a male-dominated environment. And maybe kudos to my colleagues and my boss at the time, I didn't feel like I was different. You know, I just felt like I belonged, and it opened my eyes. And I knew I didn't want to be a software programmer. I knew I wanted to be in business. I then moved to Kuwait. I met my husband, moved to Kuwait, and then decided, my husband and I, oh, wouldn't it be fun to be a housewife? I was like, yeah, try that out. So decided not to work, quit my job, moved to Kuwait, had my son, spent a year, and then realized that's not for me. So you can see my early part of my career was just deciding things that were not for me, right? Like I was saying no to a lot of things, actually. I didn't know what I was going to say yes to. But at that point, I knew I wanted to be in business. I decided to do my master's in business. I went to the US. Now, I had a 1-year-old son. I couldn't afford to take him to the US. So he was in India. My husband was in Kuwait. I was in the US. And this was before we had, you know, video calling and all of this stuff, right? So that was very interesting. It required a lot of negotiations with my in-laws. Not easy. You know, I had to risk disapproval with society. I had a lot of people who were saying all kinds of things, right? There were people who were saying to my husband, oh, she's running off to have an affair with someone. But, you know, those are the things you have to go through. You have to have the courage of conviction. I did my master's, and then I got into various roles on the procurement side, supply chain. I did financial analysis, business analysis, and then I moved over into sales, moved here to the UK. Then I've been very fortunate to live and work all over the world. So I moved to Asia, moved to Switzerland, lived and worked there. So kind of, you know, that dream I had when I opened the Atlas, whenever that was that magical moment, has proven true in my career. And that's really what's kept me going. And still on my bucket list to do, live and work in Latin America and Australia. So I'm not done yet.
Okay, so a little bit about me. I work as the Chief of Staff at Kabula, which is a tech company. In terms of my background, sorry, is that really loud? Am I too loud? Okay, great. Again, I think there's definitely a running theme here. I didn't set up to be a Chief of Staff at a tech company. I set out, initially I wanted to go into human rights. I wanted to make a difference. And I spent some time in Hong Kong working for an NGO, and I was like, this is it. I'm going to help people. I'm going to make a difference. So I did a history and politics degree, then I did a law degree, and with the thought about I'm going to be a human rights lawyer. And then I had a reality check because they don't pay huge amounts. My family, you know, we don't come from money. And it became very apparent to me that the human rights dream needed to go on hold while I sort of paid bills and things like that. So I then went into the corporate space. I was a lawyer for the BBC. Absolutely loved it. Great experience, wonderful people. Did that for a while. Still had the human rights thing kind of in the back of my mind. But then life happened, you know, I got married, I had children, and took a short career break. And during that time, I reflected, what actually do I want to do? And being a lawyer was great. My grandparents were very proud. But it was the decision-making part that I liked. It wasn't necessarily the transactional element of being a lawyer. So during my career break, I decided that actually strategy was what I wanted to do. So I then moved into the strategy and operations space, wanted to be a decision maker, wanted to drive change, wanted to be part of the change. And I kind of pivoted pivoted in my career and I'm now the chief of staff at a tech company where I oversee HR and the legal team, but I also work with the senior execs to improve processes, drive operational change. I'm still going to be a human rights lawyer one day when I grow up, but the point I'm trying to make here is that I really was clear that I wanted to do something, and life kind of doesn't always pan out that way. But when I look back and I think about the key decisions I made in my life, they were always driven by a sense of, but I want to make an improvement and make my mark. And I do feel like I've done that. I don't think, when I get asked to speak and you get put into this like leadership role, I always find it a little bit uncomfortable because I don't see myself as this like finished product. I very much see myself as like on a journey, and I don't necessarily know where the destination is, but I know I'm on it and I know I'm going in the right direction. But I'm constantly learning. And I think if there's sort of one thing that has all served me well, I've made a lot of mistakes and there are things that I look back and think, oh God, why did I say that? Why did I do that? But there's one thing that I'm kind of very proud that I've always stuck to, and that is just a sense of integrity and doing the right thing for yourself, for those around you. I think will serve you very well in terms of like having that moral compass, in terms of what your progression looks like, what trajectory looks like. Be a little bit open-minded, because what's meant for you will come. I think sometimes we try very hard to carve out a set course, and it puts a huge amount of pressure. And I'm the first person in my family to go to university, right? I'm also the older sister, and a lot of us, we have this like, you're a semi-mum when you are the oldest girl in an ethnic family. You don't realise it at the time, but looking back, we're like, wow, I had a lot of responsibility there. I didn't necessarily ask for. Also, I don't think I deserve it. Like, I definitely told my brother terrible things. Like, we won't go into that now. I tried to put him in the washing machine once as well, which was really bad. But my parents put me in charge of him when I was like 12. I was like, what did you expect? That was a very irresponsible decision on their part, not mine. But you do grow up with this sense of, I've got to perform, I've got to be the best at school, I've got to have this career figured out by the time I reach 20. And looking back, when I stopped putting that huge amount of pressure on myself and I started thinking for myself and not for everyone else, that's when the key decisions and the best decisions I ever made were made. So you mentioned earlier, Tamara, about being on the leadership. Oh, I think I'm going to swap mic, sorry. Being part of leadership conversations where we're the only ethnic women there. So I work for a company that is, listen to this, it's headquartered in Prague, right? Prague is like the whitest place in the world. The leadership team, other than me, are all male, pale, and sterile, right? And I say this to their face. They're the nicest bunch of chaps. They really, really are. But they can't help being white and male, right? So a lot of the times we're having conversations and they have a very uniform way of thinking. I'm not saying everyone who's pale and male has the same way of thinking, but these ones do. And being able to be part of the leadership team, and I'm a different age, I have a different background, I have a different perspective, strengthens the unit, it strengthens the team. And actually, all jokes aside, I have learned a huge amount from them, and they've learned from me. And it's okay to say that, right? We can say that. We weren't allowed to say that growing up, but we can say it now. So when we talk about diversity, this is why it's important. Yes, we need more females. Yes, we need more ethnicities in senior leadership. Representation is hugely important. But for me, it's that diversity of thought that really drives decisions in a positive way. And it helps everything from employee engagement to, companies making money, because if the employees always leave, it costs companies a huge amount of money. Also from a brand perspective and a marketing perspective, and as an employer, the reputation you have, which I know we're going to talk about later on. But I would say, you know, that my career is still ongoing. I actually started a new role just 3 months ago, and I got to the point in my life where everything was like quite easy. Just bought a new house, the kids got into this great school. I don't need to do school runs anymore because they're older. Everything was like weirdly good. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to change jobs because this is like freakishly calm. But it's throwing yourself out of your comfort zone, knowing, you know what, I'm getting a bit comfortable here, I need a new challenge. That also, I think, is something that will serve everyone, including me, like very, very well. So, yeah, I'm kind of excited to see what this next chapter of my life will entail. And yeah, I have some experience, turning 40 next year, so have been in the working world now for a couple of decades, and very kind of excited to share my experience with you. By no means do I think I'm this like polished professional. I mean, I am a professional technically speaking, because my LinkedIn is super professional, but it's not really me. But yeah, very happy to share my experience, happy to be here, and yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. I feel like I've just watched 4 different life stories play out in front of me, but that was super interesting, and it's really interesting to see how all these amazing women came from such different backgrounds and circumstances and still made it as experienced leaders within their fields. So it's not one formula for success, I think, is the sort of moral here. So I think the way that we sort of thought about running this kind of panel session was splitting up the idea of diversity in the present situation, the past, and the future, and having a think about what is it currently like in corporate spaces or the respective industries, the diversity situation, and then having a look at the past and what challenges did these women face going through their career journeys, and then maybe towards the end we'll come together and put our heads together and see what impact we can drive forward in the future, and support each other as a community moving forward, and what these ladies have as advice for us as a community. So let's kick off with the current situation. So the elephant in the room, diversity is a problem. We need to fix it, and we are the best people to fix it because we're at the root of this situation. So I'm going to ask Sonia to kind of, you started speaking about how your ethnic background has shaped you as a person. Can you speak a little bit about what diversity means to you, and why is it important to you, and why is it important, why it should be important for everyone?
So you should take that. Thank you. Gosh, where did I start again? All these questions are so exciting, right? So, for me, why diversity matters, and it kind of plays out in my existing role, is actually we need to reflect the population we serve, and that's very, very true of the NHS and healthcare. And as shared just now as well, I mean, McKinsey did a study on diversity, and it clearly said, with more diverse leadership and more diverse teams, better performance, better productivity, and just better decision making. And that's super important. So, you know, why not would you do diversity? You'd have to be absolutely blind, but actually that's still present in some cases now, that, you know, communities can't see beyond it. But I just want to reflect on a couple of things that will be helpful as well. So, you know, I shared with you that my grandparents were successful until my parents arrived here and we lived in the hood, right? Okay, so I do come from the hood. So not everything is kind of privileged. And so when we lived in the hood, I grew up in quite a in London, it was multi-ethnic, multi-diversity. So I didn't see any difference, right? And then I started going through education. It's when I went into my master's and I was like, I feel like I'm the only ethnic minority in this class. This feels a bit weird. And they were overseas students, and we were studying this very interesting bioinformatics, cutting edge technology now, which is probably so old age. And then in the workplace, it was just completely different. It didn't look like my school. It didn't look like my college. It just looked very different. People spoke a bit differently, they connected differently, they had different posture around actually how you engaged as well. And I kind of had to do a bit of adaptation around actually, can I say this? Can I not say that? So, you know, there's that kind of working through. And I had no one amongst me that had worked in that corporate environment. I had just my own family were all business people, so they were in their own little bubbles, and it was difficult to know kind of how to perform, how to navigate within the corporate environment within UK. However, as I started moving jobs across the NHS, so you'll find out the NHS isn't one organisation, so it's massive of many organisations and it gets quite confusing. I started finding that, particularly in the London boroughs I worked in, there was more diversity at sort of kind of as middle management, and actually I could find my tribe even within those small organisations I worked with, whether it's in hospital or it's in a GP practice. And then when fast forward like 20 years, I took up a national job. I was actually tapped on the shoulder. I would have never gone for a national job. And someone said, I think you should go for it. And I was like, there's no one like me in that national cadre of people. What makes you think I'm going to get the job? He goes, just go for it. So I did. And I had the confidence to go for it, but I didn't believe I would get it. So I thought, let me put myself forward, you know, let me try it, see what I learned through the process. And then I get a phone call saying, you've got the job. And I was like, right, okay, I've got the job. So I went to the national role, and this national role requires me to travel all around the country, doing a lot of speaking events around actually what is our strategy for the NHS on technology, how we're going to deliver better for patients. And I ended up, just after the pandemic, probably 2021, up in Yorkshire. And I was presenting to a group of probably 50 chief information officers of hospitals there. And I was the only brown female. And in fact, there were only 5 females in the room of 50, and the rest were, and I just thought to myself, am I really in this room in 2021 with this? And I understand that leadership needs to reflect the population, but I'm sure in corners of Yorkshire there are black and ethnic minority groups, and I came from London and I was the only black and ethnic minority group. So what did that say? That said, there are parts of this country where we are seeing greater diversity in communities. There's parts of the country that don't have that diversity, and maybe rightly so, because, you know, we reflect the population, but there are still some corners that are untapped, which suggests that actually there are a few problems there. One, that people don't see themselves in roles in those communities, which is something that I think more females, as we lift each other up, should actually support the future generations to be visible about, you know, what roles you can go for. Secondly, there probably are some systemic structural issues that still persist. And that is going to be an absolute generational cultural shift that we need to make. So let's not ignore the fact that there is still those issues, although there are better allies and communities in doing so. And the last bit is, I just want to say, we talk a lot about diversity, but I think there are 2 more other factors which are really important: equality and inclusivity. So it's one thing to be at a board table because you're maybe the token ethnic minority. It's another to feel like you belong there. And it's super, super important that I think there is much more work for the workplace to feel fully inclusive, not just for sort of the brown girls leaving, those that are entering this workplace, more wider diversity in terms of disabilities, neurodiversity as well. We've got a whole lot of work to do there as well. And some of this is because, you know, if we look back 50 to 70 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, everyone kind of stayed within their countries, lived within their countries, and that's how it was. And now we've got this kind of new worldwide spread of kind of migration and immigration as well, which is making us look very, very differently. So in one way, I've got real hopes for the future in the fact that this kind of new generation, we're seeing more intersectionality of different, not only different communities interacting with different communities, but we're seeing also different communities forge new relationships. And That is a new hope for the future, that actually just seeing that in your lifetime is going to make a massive difference around how you perceive that in the workplace as well. Because only seeing what you see is actually what, you know, the future. So there also, with the kind of internet age, things just are more open, that you are seeing other cultures grow up in front of you without being a part of that culture as well. So isn't that a beautiful thing as well, and how that might bring you into the workplace? So I will grab onto those opportunities. I will take on the points that actually it is still hard out there as well. So just be prepared that you do hard work, but recognise there may be people in front of you that are going that extra mile to try and make it easier for you as well. So use us as your network to help you through your next stages of career.
Thank you, Sonia. That really captured sort of the essence of it's not just about diversity, but that feeling of belonging at the table as well, which I think sometimes we might find we can get, you know, a seat at the table, but feeling like we really belong there. That really stuck out to me. Kieran, it would be interesting to hear from your perspective as sort of the chief of staff, and you talked about, you know, having a team out in Prague. How do you go about having influence in from a diverse perspective within a room of, you know, white male, male, whatever?
So just to clarify, sorry, so you're asking how I can influence
How do you, yeah.
a group or a company that don't necessarily look like me. Okay, cool. So I work for a data company, right? And a lot of the individuals who work there come from a very techy background. So for them, data is everything. And what I mean by that is when you want to put forward a proposal or you want to inject some change, the first thing that they will say is, well, where's the data? Show me the evidence. Now, trained as a lawyer, that's okay. I can provide evidence. But in my particular role, the ways that I've influenced and driven change has been first and foremost demonstrating value. That is a really, really key point. And it sounds quite obvious, like, yeah, obviously you're going to demonstrate value, otherwise why would you suggest the change? But it's the way in which you position the return of investment, or the way that you position how this is going to impact the business from a short-term, medium and long-term perspective. That is how I've been able to drive change. The second point is, again, you know, quite obvious, but it is really about cementing your reputation first. So I can go to the execs, the CEO, the CPO, and say, this is what I think we need to do, because I've proven that I can execute to a high standard consistently. There are a lot of people, I mean, I think we've got a workforce and everyone is ambitious and everyone is hungry, which is great, but a lot of people are quite impatient. And by that, I mean, they want to drive change, they want what they want now, because they feel passionate about it. And a lot of the time they're right to feel passionate about it, and the changes that they want to make are good changes. But there's also something to be said for demonstrating your consistency in the company before you expect your opinion to be heard and your change to be implemented. So I think another way in which I've driven change has been because when I propose something, I can back myself with a strong execution. And I think that is often what's missing. So when people in my team want to make a change or, you know, want to make a proposal, I'll always listen to them. I always want them to come forward. I think it's really important from an employee engagement perspective as well as everything else. But I will also kind of challenge them a little bit and say, okay, well, you want this budget, well, you want to implement this, but the last thing that you wanted wasn't complete, or it wasn't executed to a high standard. So for me to give you another opportunity here, you've got to make it worth my while. And so I think that is something that we've got to look at both sides. We can talk about driving change and being proactive, which is great and positive. We've also got to have a dose of realism as well. So back yourself, be consistent. Internal branding is a huge, huge thing in any business, I think. If you take time to build your relationship with your key stakeholders, you will be able to influence a lot more. Going back to my whole, I wanted to be a human rights lawyer, I learned that the best way that you can help people, and help can be, it means a million things to a million people, right? But the best way that you can actually help others is by being in a good position yourself, where you are able to make decisions. And in order to get to that point, you've got to deliver first. So I think that strong execution, internal branding, and the data points are 3 ways in which my personal experience has resulted in me being able to drive real tangible change.
And do you find that coming from an ethnic minority background that can still get through? If someone who wasn't from an ethnic minority background presented the same information and the same execution, do you still see that challenges?
So it's interesting. I have demonstrated the same level of passion in the boardroom than my male counterparts, with the exact same kind of passion, but objectivity, data points, no more, no less emotion. But I have been told, he's still very emotional about this, Kiri. And it's like, well, no, there's no emotion here. I'm passionate about something, just like my male counterpart is passionate about something. But because I'm female, it's often different language that is used. So a female executive is emotional, whereas the male counterpart is passionate. I've been in the room where a male leader is seen as strategic, but the female counterpart is, oh, she's being clever in a negative way. From an ethnic perspective, I've had some comments that were made in jest, but that were actually pretty insensitive. I don't know if this is always the right approach. The way I've always dealt with it is just to allow people with a very, very strong execution. But absolutely, do we have to work a little bit harder? Yes, and there's no point trying to dress that up. We do. But because a lot of the time people speak to us with their own misconceptions. So we've got to break down those barriers before we can actually demonstrate our worth. So we have an additional step, whether it's if you're female, whether, if you have a different sexuality, if you are even a parent. As a parent, I've been sat in interviews and it's kind of like I've been asked about my priorities. Whereas when my husband has gone for interviews, at no point has anyone ever asked him about time management or priorities. But they know he's a father. But as a mother, it's almost, oh, is she juggling too much? There are so many microaggressions. There are so many biases that we have to combat. But these challenges that we've had to navigate are also what makes us better. And I truly, truly believe that. If I wasn't ethnic, if I wasn't female, if I wasn't a mother, I would probably take longer to do things. I would probably not look at things from 5 different angles. I'd probably look at them from 1 or 2 angles. I probably wouldn't prioritize as well as I do, because I have to be very selective in my tasks, because I don't have as much time. But what that means is I can execute faster, I can do it to a higher standard. Multitasking is like, imagine someone asking a working mother how good you are at multitasking. It's like, are you okay? Like, we multitask without realizing it's multitasking. We just think it's just normal life. But actually, this is a skill. These are all part of our kind of arsenal of skills. We've got to stop looking at things as a challenge, but actually as an opportunity to grow, as an opportunity to sharpen our tools, sharpen our skill set. And I do actually think that when we reframe the mindset, it makes a huge difference in how we conduct ourselves, how we look at new challenges, how we interact with our peers and our colleagues. So yes, things are different when you are ethnic or when you are, part of any minority. But if you think about it and you're strategic with it, these are the things that will make you better.
That was very good. Just one point I want to make is not to underestimate the value of allies. So it's true.
Yeah.
It's incredibly hard. It's incredibly unfair. And I think we'd all be lying if we said there weren't days when you just want to go home and scream into the bloody pillow and say, I am not responsible for the color of my skin and for the chromosomes I inherited, right? But it is unfair. But having said that, what can make it fairer is there are allies out there, right? And so I think it's really important to identify who are your allies and to leverage them because they want to help you. They want to support you. They want to sponsor you. They want to see you be successful. And if 90% of the system seems unfair and the challenges seem unfair, the 10% that's out there that is getting better, it's getting 12%, it's getting 15%, is what we've got to use to get us through those tough days, because there are going to be tough days. I mean, there's no two ways to say about it. I remember when I was traveling a lot for a couple of years, I was traveling like 250 days in a year, and, I was flying constantly, was on all the top tier frequent flyer things. And, I used to land up in an airport every night and have a taxi receive me. And like clockwork, the guy would be standing there with a sign that said, Mr. Magesh. And like clockwork, when I turn up and go, it's me, it's Mrs. Magesh, it's like he's totally shocked, like he's seen a ghost, because he's expecting a man, and probably a white man. And here I am, a disappointment. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, when you've been traveling thousands of miles across 5 time zones, there are the odd occasions that you don't need that, right? And you just don't need to have to justify who you are. And the number of times that I've gone onto the plane, and so this is outside of the work, right? I sit down and every airline, they try to welcome their frequent flyers. And if my husband's traveling with me, they will welcome him because they think it's him who's the frequent flyer. And he has to go, no, I think it's my wife that you want. I'm just the, the freeloader on the 3 miles, right? Like every time, like clockwork. And that does get annoying. Not that, I'm an Asian woman. I've been trained to pack my ego at home and lock it in the triple lock. Even then, occasionally it gets out. So, but then I'd be lying if I said I'm sat here today just because of everything I did. I've had allies, whether that's my husband, whether it's been the men in my family, or my bosses. The people who hired me, the people who encouraged me, the people who said, you need to go for that job because I think you can do it. The people who cheered me on, who sponsored me, the people who spent time, helping me to network. There's been loads of people. So, they are out there, and I, look for them, recognize them, and invest and nurture those relationships.
There are some great bits of advice in like every answer that these ladies are giving. So do keep these in mind. I think it'd be interesting to hear. So we've talked a little bit about the challenges of being an ethnic minority female in the workplace. Sylvia, can you talk a little bit about a challenge that you faced and what you did to overcome that challenge?
Yeah. So obviously being in education, women in STEM has always been an issue, and it has been for many, many years. So it's not just something that's happened overnight. I think the highest proportion of women that were in computing or technology backgrounds was in the 1980s, and since then it hasn't increased. So I think one of the issues that I had was that when I was at school and university, I was going to all these events as well, trying to get women into STEM. And 20 years later, we don't seem to have progressed as much as I thought we would have. And so obviously there's an issue there because we're still fighting to have our voices heard. And it's not, it is also diversity, but it's also women in STEM just generally. And I think it's largely to do with the fact that what we need is for people to be fearless, to have a vision and to pursue it. And I've been lucky because I have done all of that. I have challenged people. I have been in positions where I've had to fight for certain things, which, as mentioned earlier, that if it had been someone else, they probably would have got it a lot quicker or easier. But I think that has got something to do with us as well. I think we need training on how to do certain things. So one of the things that is really important is learning how to be politically astute. You need to know the landscape of the organisation and you need to know how to influence people. And you also need to know that, remember that women need to stick together as well in the workplace. And I think that needs to be said to every generation that's coming through, that every single woman in the workplace, from whichever background they are, brings something to the table. And we need to address the issue. Why are people getting stuck at middle leadership and why are they leaving their professions? So one of the biggest things has been for me, the biggest challenge was that I did hit that glass ceiling in my career. What did I do to resolve it? I started attending networking events. I started talking to other people. I had leadership coaching. I started finding out the nuances of what it's like to actually work in certain industries and how to navigate those spaces that I probably wouldn't have known if I had gone through it myself. I also think it's important to learn how to work in male-dominated environments. And whilst I agree with some of the things that all my colleagues here are saying, I think it is important to have respect for everyone. And I've still got old-fashioned values. But I also see it happening in my profession. I teach boys a lot, and it normally comes through how they think, in terms of what they're seeing in society, what they're having at home in terms of their upbringing, and what information they're being fed. And also from the media. And in this day and age, we've also got social media. So we've got influencers telling them how to think as well. So I think it's really important for us to think about the fact that society has changed and we have made some progress with diversity. But I do think that it is important for us to think about the fact that we also need to think about how we need to adapt in a certain way. Now, some people have mentioned polishing skills and whether you have the right polish to be able to work and navigate in these environments, but I don't think it's just that. I think you have to be able to bring your whole self, but there is this nuance that you need to know how to operate in a landscape, how to network, how to talk to people, and I think that will be the best advice that I could give you for your career, because those were the challenges that I faced, and those challenges were overcome by me going to networking events like this.
Thank you. That was again. So do come to more Brown Girl League and BCS events. Was the message there? So at the Brown Girl League, we have a ongoing series called In Conversation With. If you follow us on LinkedIn or social media, we usually get an experienced speaker, an experienced individual to talk about their journey, and it's about a half an hour to 45-minute session, and it's a safe space for ethnic minority girls to ask questions one-to-one within a safe environment. So Chamber here was actually our inaugural speaker at the first session of this series, and she took us through her sort of journey. So my question to you, Chamber, which kind of comes from when you shared your story, is how do you find balancing your personal and professional life as an ethnic minority female?
I think the answer is I don't. I think my whole interpretation of work-life balance is, it sort of gives the sense that you attain a balance. And I more see it as sort of a pattern that I'm weaving into the fabric of life. And just like in a pattern, sometimes, the flower motif is big and, the background is small, and in some cases, the blank space is bigger and there is no pattern. And it's a choice. It's a choice that the weaver of the fabric makes. And in this metaphor, I'm the weaver. And I realize that it's my choice. So there are times, like I said, my son was a year old, he was in India, my mom thankfully volunteered to take care of him as I went off to do my master's. Did I pay a price for that? I absolutely did. I missed his first words. I didn't have to do potty training, which I'm very grateful for. And one of the reasons I decided not to have a second, because I was like, I just dodged that bullet. I don't do that again. So I paid a price for that, right? But it was a price that I was willing to pay. Because I knew this is what I wanted to do. And then, of course, as I said, I decided to try to be a housewife. And at that point, I paid a price because I took a career break, which I then spent a long time trying to explain why I did that. So, right through, and there are jobs that I've taken because it has allowed me to work from home and care for my son. And then there are jobs that I've taken where I've gone, this is my time to invest in my career. And my son and my husband have paid the price, or my family has paid the price. And that's kind of how I've worked through things, sort of thinking through what are my, and this is the thing, ultimately, it's not about trying to please everyone. I've made peace with that. I'm not going to be able to, as Sonia was saying, we play multiple roles, and I can't, it's not like I have a choice in those roles, but I can choose to decide which of those roles are my priority. And I've got to be clear. And it's just like in my career, when I'm doing my job, I'm constantly saying to my teams, you can't do everything, you have to prioritize. So I need to take that medicine and I'm going to go, what's my priority now? That's my priority. And if that is my priority, I'm saying no to a lot of other things, I am going to pay a price. And that is, am I willing to pay that price? That's the choice I make.
Great. So that's really interesting to hear. Sort of, not only do we have sort of the professional challenges in the workplace, but also the juggle within our personal lives that I think is something that can, coming to certain corporate events, you think, okay, this is just one part of you. It's not your entire personality. You also have the personal side where you're facing your own challenges. I think, especially from potentially an ethnic minority background, you have your own family situations or friendship situations that can also impact you as a person. You can't always split up your professional side and personal side. So we've talked a little bit about what the diversity situation looks like in the workplace, what some of the challenges current are, what previous challenges there have been. So now let's kind of bring everything together and kind of see, paint out the picture of where we want to go next. So Sonia, what kind of changes do we want to see in the future within the diversity space, within different industries, and how are we going to get there? It's quite open-ended.
Yeah, let's start with how we're going to get there. So the younger version of me would tell myself, and this is my advice for you, I think, is one, we've all touched on it, but be your authentic self. I always stood in meetings, I stood in kind of, forums and then sat in meetings where I was like, that person's so good, I want to be like them. But then I can't, I'm me, and, my background, how I've grown up, what my values are, shape my authentic self. Yes, okay, I'll still a little bit of that way of doing presentation or that word, but yeah, please don't try and be someone else. Be your authentic self and really understand what values shape you. I mean, we've touched on it. For me, integrity and honesty is a massive value, and it's a massive value that shapes me in the workplace as well. And so when I come across undercutters, it really peeves me, and it really does, and you can see it, and it's honest, but that's me. And actually to hide some of those, values is to be really authentic, be yourself. The second is around, do not be shy of asking for help. So that's with allies, that may be at home, because, I don't think people say, do you have to take a career choice of being a mother against actually being a good daughter, or actually career? If you want it, you can have it all, but you're not going to be kind of excellent all, that weave, that pattern is, I don't think the word work-life balance is actually appropriate, because you never strike a balance. You're always kind of firing on all cylinders. Some things you do better
on one day rather than the other. Even coming here, you know, I'm still a mother, my daughter's calling me up, I say I'm going on stage, she goes, where's my gym kit? You know, but you know, I'm not the CIO to her, I'm her mother, and that those two worlds do collide, and they collide very often as well. So, you know, you can have it all, you will need help, it's really important. But in that being, it's important to you, you'll never be recognised at home for something else. I think my mother-in-law thinks I still work at Sainsbury's, but that's another thing, do you know what I mean? It's okay, I go to work. What she is an absolute gem and actually supporting me when I need my support with my children as well. And you'll find those allies. Don't be shy to get help if you need a cleaner or you need someone to help. You know, that was all shied upon in my generation. How dare you get a cleaner? You should be working full-time, being a full-time wife and also cleaning and cooking. All of that has changed. So it's about, you know, who you make partner decisions with, who's in your network, what do you do? And the last bit, which I think is this group itself, find your tribe. You will need to have a strong network to ride the storm. You know, some days will be better than others, but you want to know that you have somewhere where you are amongst others that are facing similar situations where you can just have that conversation. You know, you just sometimes need someone to listen, or provide a bit of advice or steer on how you go, but find your tribe. And I think this is the perfect tribe to have. I have mine. I have something called the Shuri Network in the NHS, which is Spain female women. And it's brilliant, you know, we can just have a quick natter, recognise there's still issues, and then carry on as well to try and make a difference as well. And then the three things that I think are super important around the diversity journey that we will continue to go on, you know, in our careers, in the way that our teams work, is number one, data counts. So it's really, really important. We were having a conversation at the community board with John yesterday to say, well, how do we know if we're diverse if we haven't got the data? So fundamentally, we need to get better data. You need to contribute your data. I know there's concerns about sharing your ethnicity data, but if we don't, we're never going to make a difference. So it's really, really important we contribute to data visible. Second is visibility. If you do end up in a position of privilege or take up a new team leader role or a new part of a career where you're surrounded by just a community which you're different to, tell your story, you know, make it visible that you've kind of broken a new barrier or you're working in a new team and you're making a difference as well. And my third point around, I think, collective efforts is what I call constructive agitation. And what that means is slowly nudge the conversation to say, have you looked around the room today? Because some won't. And say, oh, have they left the women out of the group today? And that constructive agitation. So the other thing is, you know, slowly dropping in that people should be recognising that actually the room isn't full of the diverse people that we need. But also, when I mean constructive agitation, is make a positive difference around how we can bring diversity. Because you know what, we can talk about it and say it's a problem, but we have the opportunity to act as well. Even in our smallest circles, we should try and constructively agitate to make a difference.
Thank you. Lots of advice there. And I think just conscious of time, we'll just start wrapping up with a little bit more advice from these ladies here. So Kieran, can I hand over to you to give a little bit of advice to the ladies and men here who are, you know, in the early stages of their career, and what can they do to navigate the sort of corporate landscape at the moment?
Big question. Good pressure. Okay, so a couple of nuggets of advice that served me well and I hope serve you well. And I wish I learned these. I learned these in my 30s. I wish I learned them in my 20s. Number one is don't wait to rise, which sounds a bit abstract. What I mean by that is, if you want progression, the corporate landscape, well, not landscape, but there, you know, you've got your eye on progression. Sometimes we feel, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready to manage a team or to lead that project, because we have these set notions in our head that we need to hit these milestones. In my experience, when things have been thrown at me, actually it's happened in my current role now. I joined as the chief of staff and I was meant to work with the CEO, CRO and PO. And I've now been given the entire HR and legal team to manage. And I was just, oh God, but you know, I can't be doing that. But actually, I can do it. I have to refocus and reframe a few things, but I can do it, and I am doing it. Don't wait to be ready, because that won't come. You don't wake up one day and say, I'm suddenly ready to do that. Be kind to yourself. Everyone makes mistakes. And I always say, you win or you learn. Every opportunity, everything in life, you win or you learn. So whatever happens, you're in a better position because of it. So don't wait to rise. You win or you learn. And something that I actually am still struggling with a little bit, and I know I need to get better, is that sometimes good enough is enough. Because I don't know if many of you share this, but I like to do things to a very high standard. I want everyone else to do things to a very high standard, and I'm very, I'm forgiving with others. I'm not very forgiving on myself. And it hasn't held me back professionally, but I would say in those quiet moments when I reflect on my day, on my month, on my career, I'm always very unforgiving to myself. And actually that's not good advice. I wouldn't want my children to be like that. I wouldn't want my friends to be like that. I don't want you guys to be like that. So not everything needs to be perfect. Not everything needs to be the best thing you've ever done. Sometimes good enough really, really is good enough. So I would say those are the three things. I mean, there's loads more. I've made loads of mistakes, so I've got loads of things I can teach you. But I think those three, rise before you're ready, good enough, and what's the second thing I said? Be kind. Thanks. Someone's paying attention, thank you. I think are the three best things that I would want to share with you guys.
And Champa, you've talked about your sort of personal experiences, your professional journey, a lot of different roles, movements. Can you talk a little bit about when things don't go according to plan? What can we do? Because I think, like everyone here mentioned, we kind of have one idea of where we are kind of going. I think amongst the room, we know what our next step is, or maybe our 5-year plan is potentially. But as we've kind of heard from the stories here, it doesn't really go according to plan. So what can we do when things don't go according to plan?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and I speak from experience on this, is to find opportunity in adversity. If I think back to my career and think about what were the most transformational moments in my career, they were the moments where I was on the brink of absolute disaster, right? Now, I'm not suggesting, therefore, that everybody needs to put themselves in absolute disaster, but here's the beauty of when you're in that moment where you're like, I'm going to lose everything, the risk is very low. You have nothing more to lose, and so you tend to take bigger risks, right? And that's where the opportunity happens. So I'll give you an example. I seem to have found myself in my career landing up in industries when they were on the brink of a massive readjustment. So in the year 2000, when, you know, internet companies were all the rage and share prices were going up, I was working for Cisco Systems. You know, John Chambers, the CEO at the time, was boasting about how he moved from IBM to Cisco because he would never have to lay off anyone. I joined 3 months later, the internet bubble burst and Cisco was laying off people, and I was on the list, right? It was like my dream job. 3 months in, I was gonna lose it. I then, you know, many years later, I was, in the year, in 2008, when I was in American Express, financial services, what happened? Global financial crisis. American Express, 100-year-old company, was 10 days from going bust, right? And I was right there in financial services industry. Lehman Brothers had gone bust, banks were going bust. There was no hope of finding a job in financial services. And, you know, my job was, you know, at risk of redundancy. So this has happened frequently to me. Now I'm like, game on, bring it on, because I have a whole playbook for this thing, right? But what I learned from that was to turn the adversity into opportunity. So you know, network, think about, okay, what are my transferable skills? What can I do differently to show hunger, to show passion? In the Cisco Systems example, I had just completed my master's, come over here, got a job, my ideal job. I was running a production line for Cisco. I loved it. And of course, they were saying your job is going to be made redundant. And of course, at that time, we also had 9/11. So the entire supply chain globally was messed up, right? So I was running this billion-pound run rate product for Cisco. My job was to sort of ship all the components on time so these routers could be built and shipped to our customers. And only if we shipped them, we got paid. And because we had parts all over the world and we couldn't ship it on time, the company couldn't get paid, right? Like, this was a massive problem for the company on top of the internet bubble bursting and everything. So I knew I was going to lose my job, 3 months of consultation and then 3 months notice period. So I had 6 months. And I thought, you know what, the whole industry is going through a meltdown. I'm not going to find a job. I'm fresh out of university. So here's what I'm going to do. This is my dream job. I'm going to do the best job I possibly can for 6 months. Not because I thought I was going to keep the job, but because I thought I can have a good time doing the dream job. This is what I was feeling sad about. So, you know, I worked the phones, I used all my contacts, I moved parts around, and at the end of 3 months, I found myself as the best performing master scheduler in the company. You know, my percentages of on-time shipment were 80%. Everybody else was at 40%. So then they went, oh my God, we can't let you go. And I hadn't even thought about that, right? Like, I was like, why didn't I think about that as a part of this whole strategy? So I kind of ended up where they said, we can't let you go. But obviously they didn't have a job for me. They said, the job we do have, you're not qualified for, but we're going to make a bet on you, and we want you to set up the first low-cost manufacturing that we're establishing for us in Hungary. I had no qualifications for this job, clearly way above my pay grade, but found myself in this position. And that came out of adversity. And that same thing happened when I was working for American Express. So now I know that when something like this happens, I go, okay, I'm going to park the emotions. I'm going to be really rational about this and find my way through it. So that's the advice I would give anyone.
Amazing, amazing advice here. So thank you all, ladies. I'm going to ask Jana to come over and do close thank yous and audience Q&A as well. Just conscious of time.
Right, let's do the awkward walk.
Thank you.
Wow, that's all I can say because, oh my gosh, wow. What incredible speakers and incredible women. I have learned so much just sitting in the back, and I'm sure everyone else in this room has learned so much too, and sort of experience of an enthusiasm and motivation to go and take on the world. But in the meantime, we do have a couple minutes left, so if there's any questions, we'll be more than happy to take them. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for talking. It's been so inspirational and empowering. You've spoken a lot about all the successes that you've had, but I was wondering if you had any examples of a big failure that you've learned a lot from.
Who wants to take the question about failures?
So there's been lots of times when I've been really keen about a particular job and got really excited and got, that's the job for me. And, you know, prepared for the interview, put in a lot of effort and just completely fallen flat on my face. It isn't even that I didn't get it. You know, in the moment I could have made up excuses, but if I think back, I probably didn't do as well as I did. Right, and that's a failure. I remember particularly one opportunity was I was in American Express at the time. I was on the card issuing side of the business, and I wanted to get into the network side of the business because that was, I felt like a very strategic job. It involved working with other countries, and you know, I just felt like it was a progression I needed. And it was an internal move, and at that time, I had quite a lot of good credibility in the company. I won recognitions and stuff. So I guess, I had this ego thing as, I'm on top of my game. I'm going to get this job. I read the job description, and in my head, there was no better candidate for the job than me, right? Like it was, I'm just riding high and this job is meant for me. So hand on heart, I probably didn't do the research. And if I'm being fair about it, the hiring manager was also being a bit, sort of holding the bar high maybe, but so it's an internal job and I go in with a lot of credibility. So I went for the interview and initially it was supposed to be a chat because that's how it works in American Express. So I thought it's going to be an initial chat and then they'll set up a formal interview. So I hadn't even done the basic preparation. I turn up and the hiring manager just treats me like an external candidate and just gives me the full words, right? Like fires questions at me that would have required me to have done research, that would have required me to have spoken to customers, just a very high bar for preparation for this particular job. And I was just zero prepared. Like I had none of the basic information because I turned up thinking this is a chat, right? Very embarrassing. So I went away knowing no way I'm getting this job. Right? But then I thought, my ego was wounded, but more importantly, I was very upset with myself because that was a rookie mistake to make. I needed to have prepared if I cared about the job. So I actually, over the weekend, that's all I did. I pretended like the interview hadn't happened, did copious amounts of research, built a whole strategic SWOT analysis paper and everything. And then I emailed it to him and said, look, I'm not applying for the job. I don't deserve the job. But you know what? I feel like I need to set right the rookie mistake I made. So here's the analysis. And okay, I didn't still get the job, but I made a friend, right? So that hiring manager was an ally. He and I used to talk about other jobs I was going for. And that's a scar I still carry. So now any job, even a chat, I am so prepared because I never want to repeat that experience again.
Wow. Can I share one second? Thank you. So I went for a job, a new job about 5 years ago, and I really wanted it. I really, really wanted this job more than I'd ever wanted a job before. It was for a law firm. It was doing strategy, kind of a chief of staff role. Everything about this law firm I liked, the position I liked, the money I liked, all of it. And the process was really, really long. It was like 8 stages. And I got down to the last two, in the last two, right? It's me and another chap. And I cannot explain, I became almost like obsessed with getting this role. I just thought if I get this job, everything is right in the world. And I didn't get it. And it really took the wind out of my sails. And then I got a bit weird, actually, it's a bit of an overshare, but then I found out who got it on LinkedIn because I followed this law firm on LinkedIn and made this post like, oh, new head of strategy. And then I looked him up and I was like, oh my God, can't believe he got the job. Anyway, we digress. The point is that I, during that process, I became really focused in what I wanted from a career move and the next step. And I didn't get that job, but I was in that frame of mind, like I actually do want a new role and I do want a new challenge in this space. And I applied for other roles and eventually I got one of these and it's great. But the point is, I genuinely think that when we have these challenges, we've got to start adopting an approach that a closed door is actually a redirection. It's a redirection. It's, this opportunity may not be for you, but something else is. And I wish I got to that approach sooner, but now that I've got that, things are better. And the way I interact, the way I see challenges, the way I see things professionally and personally is better. Because I just think, okay, I'm not going to fixate on that. That wasn't meant for me. I'm disappointed, but that's okay. That's part of life. But it's a redirection. So I think that's something that I found to be very helpful.
When I was young, I was very rebellious. I felt that I knew everything, and I was very headstrong. I have been since I was a child. And so there was a situation at work which challenged me. It was my first job. I wasn't that experienced, and I handed in my notice without a job to go to. And so at that time, the leader who was in charge of me said to me, "Don't be silly, you'll never get a job in this industry again." He actually threatened me. But I'm glad it happened because it forced me to level up on my skills. At the same time, now that I've navigated my industry and I've worked in so many different places, I look at the last 20 years and I think, you know what? Sometimes, Sophia, you just need to take advice from other people and listen to what they're saying, because other people do know what they're talking about as well. And I think that's really important, because it's something that one of my colleagues said earlier, that don't be afraid to ask for help. And as women, I do feel that even though I was headstrong, I felt that I knew everything, but I was also a bit shy about asking how to do certain things. So rather than going up to my boss and saying to him, "I don't really know how to do this," I said, "See ya." And that probably wasn't the best thing to do. So my advice to you would be that, like all my colleagues have said, reflect on your experiences and whilst you're navigating, even in your education and your studies, what you're going through now, really think about who you are as a person. And think about, we were discussing this earlier, think about your values, think about what you bring to the table. And also don't eliminate what people are saying around you in terms of, yes, have your own voice, but also think about what people are saying to you and whether that information is appropriate for you. Okay, because sometimes, as we said earlier, allies are important. You can't navigate these spaces on your own. So when someone says to you, you're doing something silly, just step back and think about it carefully before you make a decision.
I'll share a real epic fail I had, right? So I was running digital services for local hospitals during COVID, right? Pretty tough. It's like, war zone when I was running big services, nurses crying, patients not being able to see their loved ones, everything closed down. My staff didn't want to go on the wards to book, computers in. Anyway, so I felt scarred because I was trying to do this. Swish 2 weeks later, after I've been in a COVID trust, I was told, you need to go and do your national role that you're about to go to. Within 4 months, we need you, your country's falling. So I did. First day in, 2 hours in, I'm put in front of the Secretary of State, and I'm sitting there going, okay, what am I meant to say? Like, I hadn't switched off, and I went into the meeting. So I explained who I was and what my mission might be. And you know what the response from him was? And now, don't talk to me like a politician, tell me what the real answer is. So it just goes to show that even then, I hadn't time to switch and reframe, basically, in terms of the new chapter or the new situation you're in. It's so important. Just take a bit of time out as you take a new part of your journey, or you're in a new disposition, or you're in a new setting, because it's super, super important. But I just want to share, even people like me, having that career, have made epic fails in epic situations and been told by a politician not to talk like a politician. So just to say there is hope for everyone.
I think that's all great advice. So thank you so much for sharing. And guys, we all make mistakes, and I think it's really important that, especially even incredible women like this here, have made mistakes, and it's totally fine. Look how successful they are now and how more successful they'll be in the future as well. Conscious of time, I will wrap up the Q&As, but everyone will still be around for a little bit. So if you do have questions, feel free to ask them. But in the meantime, thank you all for coming, and thank you to those who joined us online. It's been a great time. And please join me in applauding our incredible panelists, but also our incredible ally in the back, John, who was a key pivotal individual who helped us pull tonight together. So,